Welcome to the One Take Podcast. If you can't tell already by the fact that we're in the same room together, I finally got to see my brother face to face, and he does not disappoint. And by the fact that we have these two lovely gentlemen with us, this is a very special episode. You are about to watch part 2 of a 2-part podcast. This is like the Avengers Endgame to Avengers Infinity War. You wouldn't want to skip the first Avengers of the Infinity War saga.
We're in the dour part where everyone dies.
Yeah, exactly. So if you want to see that part, you want to watch part 1 of this podcast where we talk about Kingdom of Heaven. We got to the Siege of Kerak. Go watch part 1 on their channel. Link in the description. And then once you finish that, come back here for part 2 where we'll get through the rest of the movie. You're giving me a look. Anything you want to add?
No, the look was like, good job. I hope you don't accidentally throw it to me because I don't know what to say, except this is a great podcast. Hope you enjoy it.
Yeah, normally when we're on Zoom, I don't see these little side glances he gives me.
Saw this side eye.
He puts a hand over the camera and was like, oh.
It's weird being in a room with you for the first time in years.
Yeah. Well, why don't you two introduce yourselves?
I'm Brian Rupert from the Reviewing History podcast. I also work with the podcast Tell 'em Steve Dave. I do video work with them. That's why we're in their studio. And occasionally I do video work with the podcast Tuesdays with Stories with comedians Mark Normand and Joe List.
And I'm his co-host, Steve Medagliaco. I am the webmaster for Reviewing History and the editor and everything else.
And sometimes assistant on
assistant.
Tell 'em Steve Dave projects.
Correct.
I do.
Sometimes.
So.
And their podcast is called, like you just said, Reviewing History.
Yep. Available anywhere you get your podcast, Reviewing History, YouTube, like, subscribe. Our Review History Pod on Twitter, Reviewing History Pod everywhere else. Check us out. We're anywhere you get your pods. We go through historical movies. We tell you what's real and fake in them as we make dick and fart jokes, and that's basically the best way to sum up our show. I think.
That kind of language is not. We don't usually do that.
Yeah,
on
now that we're on, now that we're on One Take, we're gonna have to clean up our act a little bit.
I gotta
all
be
right?
all right. I can go full Jerry Seinfeld and go clean if you
We
want.
should make it clear that if you do, when you go back and listen to the part of this podcast on Reviewing History, we condone none of what was said, whether it was said by them or by us.
Yeah, even if we said it, you assume it was said under duress.
We sound like two separate podcasts. Great.
All right, well, let's pick back up.
Yeah.
The Siege of Kerak.
Yes.
So basically, the Salah ad-Din, what is his name again? Salahuddin. His army is coming, and this village is essentially, or the castle is essentially defenseless. So Baldwin is going to try and hold off the army while they wait for their own forces, King Baldwin IV, to show up. Yeah. So they hold their own as best they can, but of course they lose because they're way outnumbered. But Baldwin's life is spared by the guy who Baldwin spared his life earlier.
Yep.
And
his act of mercy is repaid.
Exactly, which you never see anymore. The lesson nowadays seems to be no good deed goes unpunished. And I feel like you were talking earlier about the idealism and the optimism. I think that's a great example of it.
You know, I was going to mention it earlier, though. The question of what does mercy bring, you get different messages when you go through history. So Julius Caesar was very famous for his clemency. It helped him get to power. And then he showed mercy to all of the senators who fought against him. And then what happened?
We named a salad after him.
Exactly.
His enduring legacy. Yeah.
So what's the lesson in all this?
All of the senators he showed clemency to stabbed him in the Senate and killed him. So I don't know. I don't know about mercy.
So I feel like sometimes in this movie, it's a little bit hopelessly optimistic. And I give it a little bit of leeway because there's also cynicism, right? To skip ahead to the ending, the war will go on for thousands of years and peace is still elusive. Yeah. So history has borne out the cynicism. So if you can have little pockets of optimism, and that's even what that hospitalier, what he says, if there's peace and it's only a short while, we had it.
Yeah, at least at one point, shit wasn't as bad,
Yeah.
So
Failed already. It's been 10 seconds.
I know. Sorry.
Strike one.
All right. I will be good. No more cursing. I'm so not going to make
I'll bring back the, what did they do on that Puck Nuts where he would like blow the whistle or ring the bell anytime somebody cursed?
So I love this shot because a lot of these war movies, they do, when you do see those big scenes where a lot of people, it's zoomed out, and it's only like one or two. In this, it's consistent. The marches are expansive. The charges are expansive. Even this, when it's zoomed out, you see this like small little cavalry charge just get utterly surrounded. And I feel anytime you do see the protagonist coming up against some like insane odds. You don't get a sense of them being surrounded like that and seeing them just completely decimated. And this was like, oh, how are you going to survive this? And back to the first half of this, I feel like it's another thing. It's like, look, God wanted you to survive. Like, you should be dead. And then on top, not only did you survive, but a guy that you saved is now here to save you. So it's like, to your mercy thing, it's like, see, if you are merciful, God's going to take care of you. It's kind of like that hint right there where our co-host who said like this is anti-religious, I don't think so.
Well,
I don't think so at all, really.
You're right. There is that idea that he's rewarded because he was a good person and he did the right thing.
Yeah.
So that his life is spared in return. And it's that whole almost karmic cycle, which isn't really a tenet of any of the Abrahamic religions, but
Talking about the visual component, one thing this movie loves, and I think it works every time, is the hidden army. Like, oh, there's one guy. Oh, wait a minute. Right over the hill, there is a giant force. And then, like you said, when they surround him, it's the sea all over again, where there's no chance he's going to survive. And then, yes, it's the mercy that saves him, but the person he saved had to be there in the right place at the right time to see him in order to spare his life.
It's a miracle. It's a miracle right there. And we get that saying, right? Like he's on the ground, he's face planted, and you hear who we now know is the chancellor to Saladin. He's like, your enemies knew you,
right?
Like, and he kind of wakes up like,
like I said,
it's my buddy.
I kept my word, right?
And then we have the two kings meet, like we talked about back in part 1.
I messed up.
You messed up.
I almost said the F word. I did. Yeah. Do I really have to be? Are you guys really?
No, not at all.
Thank God. Yeah. I was like, this is gonna be very difficult.
Yeah. Now I have to roll with it.
Yeah.
We usually don't curse, but not for any reason. It's just the way I've always been when I'm talking like on a podcast or like. No, I remember like back when I used to work back in the corporate world.
Okay.
I always gave off that vibe. So like if somebody was in a meeting with like 15 people, they would curse and they would look at me and be like, "Oh, sorry, Gil," and I'm like, So I've decided I have that Clark Kent thing. I've decided to just lean into.
You're very Superman. Yeah.
You're a perfect knight.
Thank you. I mean, you said it, not me.
Yeah.
Perfect.
I'm a teacher. It's so hard for me when I'm talking to these kids because I just like want to be like, come on, like I want to say shit and fuck.
You have the one kid in the
what?
Well, so we get back in Jerusalem.
Yes.
King Baldwin IV promised to Saladin that he was going to punish Renaud. So he arrests him, and Renaud devolves into yelling, "I am Renaud of Chatillon." He says it over and over again, more times than is actually in the script. So they really leaned into it. And this is where, if Ridley Scott wanted any of the villains to come off as like three-dimensional, this guy is a cartoon character, and even more so as the movie goes on. Not to say I didn't enjoy the performance.
I think Gleason's having so much fun in that role. Like, just like when he's going crazy dancing and like, he seems like he's having a blast.
Well, the dancing only happened because he got word that the king is dead. So he's like, oh, the king's dead and my enemies are dead. That means I'm probably going to survive because my guy's in power. He wasn't dancing at first. He was kind of like...
At first, he was jumping up on the wall, climbing. And the funniest part of the movie is he's yelling again, "I am Renaud of Chatillon." And it's got a great echo. And then he just starts going, oh. And the guard just like slams the door shut. He just wants to bother people at a certain point.
Chaotic neutral, I guess.
I think he's chaotic evil.
Evil? I don't know. Because he does both.
But I also like it for his character because he has like a religious... violent fervor. Like, it makes sense.
Right. If you were to talk, his motivations versus Guy's, like the impression I get from Guy is I want power. The impression I get from Renaud is I'm a warmonger and I want to go back to, kill the non-believers or wrong believers like we did in the good old days.
Right. Yeah. And so at the time when this is happening, like, he gets smacked around. He gets arrested. The king's in bad shape, but he's like, "Bellion, I gotta talk to you. Like, come with me." And he says, like, I want you to pretty much lead. That's what he's referencing, because he ain't gonna survive much longer. He knows his time is short.
And that's kind of a possible real historical tidbit because he did have leprosy, so he knew he was gonna die in real life. So there's like theories that he did build kind of some contingency plans for his death. What those actually were, nobody knows for sure.
Yeah,
but, it's rumored that, he had some sort of discussions like, I have leprosy. I'm not going to be here forever.
Right. Well, and as he's preparing for death, he's 100% focused on logistics, like making sure Balian is there, and the patriarch, or I'm not sure what his official title will be, but the head of the religious sect there, he's trying to talk to him, like, time to make your confession.
Oh, the cardinal, I think.
The cardinal, and the king is completely uninterested in all that. He's like, I'll confess to God when I see him myself. Yep. So there is a running theme where on both sides of this battle, you kind of try to find a greater ideal that transcends the religions and gets away from like the particular laws of your own.
You know what? So on the other show, like when we were talking about, we said the movie is anti-religious order, not anti-faith.
Yeah.
That's right. The main distinction. It's anti-organized religion. And that's like, I think, kind of the more explicitly stated thing in the movie. Now that we're talking about it and what you said with the confession, it finally clicked for me. Yeah. And I think that's what it is.
So I showed you the light.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But yeah, like you were saying, part of the king getting his affairs in order is we cannot let Guy kind of take control of the army after I die. So he asks Balian, would you marry my sister? It's okay, maybe. And what about Guy? Well, we'll execute him, of course. Right. And Balian trying to be the perfect knight, I cannot allow that execution, on my behalf. Well, so he refuses.
Yeah. The execution, though, is not just Guy. It's Guy and all his Templars.
Anybody who refuses to swear allegiance to Balian.
Which seems reasonable, though. Like,
unless you have like 200 guys who are like, no, and now you have to kill 200 people who were fighting for faith. That's... You're condemning your soul in Balian's eyes.
Gil doesn't like when I do this. I was going to say, well, it was a different time back then. If somebody didn't swear loyalty, you kill them.
Chop their head off.
I would say that he does it all the time on the podcast, but there's no evidence because I always just cut it right out.
So that last 5 minutes, no one heard any of it.
Yeah.
But that kind of goes back to the King Baldwin's lesson, where he's just like, you are in charge of your own soul, like virtue. You can't say like virtue wasn't an option. Like God's not going to accept that. So he actually gives his own words to him. Like, yeah, I can't do that. You're telling me to control, like own my own soul and have control of it. And now you want me to sell myself out for that. I'm not doing it.
And I love, like, across the board in this movie, nobody minces words or wastes time. So even Liam Neeson, when he first offers to Orlando Bloom at the beginning of the movie, come with me to Jerusalem, he's like, no. He's like, okay, you'll never see me again. Goodbye. Yeah. And then
he does come back for a second.
I know. So that stressed me out so much because it reminded me of like back when I was first applying for jobs. You'd get an email where like, there's a great opportunity for an internship. And then I'm like, I'll take care of that later. Like 2 days later, I email in and they're like, the job came and went. You missed your chance. And here it's like Liam Neeson is telling him, this is the last time you'll ever see me. And when he comes back 5 minutes later, like, by the way, here's where I'm going to be if you want to find me. I was like, oh my God. Okay. Feel a lot better now.
He's really sending, his signals. Like, like when a girl, when you ignore her for a bit and then hey, it's like, I really don't like being ignored. Like, what's up?
That's like the back on the Facebook back in the day, the pokes.
Poke, yes. Pokes. Yeah, it's like a dark age poke.
Yeah. But Ed Norton, King Baldwin IV, he does the same thing here. When Balian turns down the offer to marry his sister, he doesn't really push back on it very hard. He just says, okay, like kind of that resignation of I'm dying soon. I can't waste time on having a debate I know I'm not going to win or convince this person who cannot be moved.
That's already your beliefs. I'm not changing it. All right. We'll go to plan B.
Yeah, exactly. And he's steadfast he won't listen to King Baldwin IV. When Sibylla comes up to him herself, he says, no, I can't do that. He is the perfect knight.
And she's like, I'm going with like your arch nemesis right away. I'm not waiting a second.
Well, you also died at a young age, right? So
you don't have a lot of time. Let's go. Let's go quick.
Most of us wouldn't be at this table if it was the Middle Ages.
Well, Balian had his meeting with the dying king, and now it's Sibylla's turn. And she refuses at first, and I feel like she gets a pretty heavy pass for this. But when she goes to see the king, he goes, I've missed you. So she has not been going to see him for years because his illness makes her so uncomfortable.
Well, not just that. Leprosy, like, you guys ever see the movie Ben-Hur?
Yeah, a long time ago.
Okay. So it's like, leprosy is super contagious and deadly. So it's like, I don't blame her. Like, if my mother or sister had it, I'd be like, I love you guys. Like, we could FaceTime. I ain't going near each other.
Fortunately, it is curable now.
Now, yeah. I'm talking, medieval times.
Well, see, that's pretty fair. And if she had used that excuse, like, hey, I have a son, I can't risk getting sick and getting my son sick. But what she said, yeah, I know, it works out that way. But what she says is, I can't bear to see him. Doesn't mean I don't love him. Yeah. But of course, she does go to see him, and they kind of just reminisce about the past. Very sad scene.
Well, there's actually something that pays off in a very slight bit. There's it's almost like a 3-beat. So there's a point where he tells her, like, don't take my mask if I want you to remember me as I was.
Yeah.
Before I was like all fucked up and disfigured.
Beautiful.
And later, when he dies, she goes to the funeral and she pops his mask off and sees like his mangled face. Leprosy like causes like parts of your face and limbs to fall off and stuff due to loss of blood. And then later,
I thought it was God punishing vanity.
I think that too. Yeah. That's another condition. Yeah. But so then after that, there's a scene where Eva Green is looking in the mirror when she's cutting off her hair, and in the reflection, what she sees is her brother's mangled face.
Well, the mirror is like distorted.
Well, it's like distorted, and it kind of looks like there's no nose and stuff. It's like that. Her brother almost like kind of warned her, like, don't look at this. Like, that's what you're going to think of. And later, that's what she's seeing.
Well, but not just that. I think that's also her seeing, this is after she killed her own son, right? Which is like a mercy killing, sort of, but it's also her not being able to bear her son's suffering. And also, her selling herself to evil in a way, right? To stay in power and theoretically to keep her son safe. Yeah, she sticks in her marriage with this evil guy who is going to cause war. And so I think she's seeing, the evil choices she's made.
Yeah, there's definitely a part of that too. I think Ridley Scott does a really good job of directing this in like a deep way and like hitting some themes subtly and some very overt.
Yeah.
But overall, I think he does a really good job directing, and like things like that, like the little face in the reflection, like some people may not even notice it. Others will have my reading, then they'll have your reading. And I think it's all kind of correct. And I think that's like a deep, rich way to direct a movie.
And like you're pointing out, a lot of it comes out in the visuals. And that's what we were saying back in part 1. I mean, I think this is a pretty solid script, but a lot of times, even if it's a weaker script, Ridley Scott will bring it to the next level purely on the visuals.
Well, and this is a good, what's your friend's name?
Anthony.
Anthony. So he's not here, so he can't defend himself.
Which is what we like the best.
People, they want to criticize all this stuff about the movie because of the historical context, whatever. Look, like this is the stuff that matters. These cool cinematography things, these thematic elements. That's what makes this movie great.
Well, I do tend to have the attitude in any kind of sequel adaptation, whether it's adapting something fictional or nonfiction, I try to take it on its own terms and just say, like, as a story, does this work? Which I guess is counter to your guys' podcast.
I think that's fair because our
accuracy.
Podcast may as well be called Well Actually.
Yeah. Well, actually.
Yeah, because it's a bunch of nerds going around being like, well, actually, this is what happened in real life. But, we try to make it a little more fun. But, I totally agree with what you're saying. Where, like, sometimes you have to separate it, but my rule with it is the movie has to, if you're going to change history and like kind of fuck up timelines and shit like that, you need to achieve a certain level of like excellence.
You got to earn it.
To where it's worth it.
Yeah.
I don't know if this movie does. I wasn't bothered too much by it, but I can understand why someone else would be.
Totally. Especially like if you are trying to, if it disagrees with your narrative of history, it can cross into the territory of, I'm not just quibbling over factual errors. I'm quibbling over like who are the good guys and who are the bad guys. Like, it gets into that territory.
Definitely. Because all the main beats of this movie, all the main parts are fairly historically accurate. Those battles are fairly historically accurate. The people who are in this existed. There's no real fake people to the extent where it's like, oh, I can't believe they're doing this.
There's like fake details about the big people. Yeah.
But if our co-host Anthony had his way, the movie would be 500 years long.
But I don't know. He did it in about 5 minutes. He was covering about a century a minute. So,
but
that was him going slow. If he was at the table, we would have spent like 30 minutes.
If you're kind of making a movie about a time period, you have to kind of take all these pieces and jumble them together to have the important parts stand out. So you get a good understanding of what was happening, but it might not be exact. I think this movie hits that point where you could watch this and be like, hey, what happens in the Crusades or the Second Crusade, the Third Crusade, and you'd have a pretty decent understanding of who the players were and why they were doing what they were doing, you know. And I think that's taking the religion out of it and just looking at history. They did a pretty decent job with it. I'll say that.
Yeah. Well, we get to a pretty pivotal scene at this point that we kind of mentioned earlier, but this is when Balin's in the desert and he's totally lost faith. He sort of makes fun of the burning bush. He throws a rock, spark sets off a fire, and he goes, "There's your burning bush."
Yeah.
And this is where the hospitalier shows up, who, like I said earlier, Ridley Scott intended for him to play a sort of angel role. So whenever he's having this crisis of faith, he'll show up and kind of set him on the right path. And I feel like what he does here is he sees what's really gnawing at Balian, because he doesn't talk him back up on the religious angle. He asks him, "Do you love Sibylla?" And he says, yes. And he goes, "The heart will mend." So I think he can tell, like, yes, he's having a lot of issues, but right now he just had to say no to the woman he loves who actually wanted to marry him, or at least somebody he's in the process of falling in love with. And then he reminds him of what we're fighting for, because he essentially says, we need to protect the people who are about to face a reckoning for what was done 100 years before. The Muslims will never forget, nor should they.
So, yeah, they say it explicitly in the movie, I think, or they do later. But when the Christians took Jerusalem, I mean, the history of Jerusalem is like complicated. So the Jews were there for, you know, hundreds of years, if not thousands. The Romans threw all the Jews out. They took it over. Then they were pagan. Then they became Christian. So, and there's a scene in the movie later where they're like, who owned this? Was it the Jews who had it? Then the Christians who built this here? Then the Christians were thrown out, and then the Muslims put that on top of that, you know? And it's like, who has claim? There's that whole speech. So it's a complicated history of the region itself. And, you know.
Yeah. I think at this point.
Oh, I'm sorry. I lost my track of thought. This is what I was going to say. So when the Christians took it, so when the Muslims threw the Christians out, then when the Christians ended up taking it back from the Muslims after the Caliphate, they went in and they just butchered people. You know, they full like Inquisition level violence, just massacring people, and they took it over. And that's what they're referring to when they're like, the Muslims will never forget what happened here.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's juxtaposed with what happens at the end.
Correct.
Where, can I ask you guys a question? Would the movie have started a little stronger if the movie opened with that massacre rather than the text?
Ooh.
If it was a cold open with like maybe like a 5 to 10 minute sequence showing the Christians getting Jerusalem back and seeing what happened, and then having that hang over the rest of the movie.
I think that if you took the movie as it stands now and you added that, I don't think it would have worked. But there could be a better version of the movie where you start with that, because it creates a big challenge. It'd be hard to watch that scene and not hate the people who came in and slaughtered everybody. And you'd have to contend with that. The reason they set the movie at this time, because it's one of the more peaceful times in the midst of the Crusades, where if you're going to try and portray every side as equally sort of, everyone's got blood on their hands and you're not going to hate one side over the other. Now, if they were able to start with something like that and then find a way to get you to that point, that would be impressive. As the movie stands now, though, I don't think it would have worked.
I can see it. That's fair.
Historically speaking, also, it's not like Christians only massacred Muslim, like conquering a city and massacring the inhabitants. I mean, Europeans were doing that to Europeans. I guess I don't know if that was happening in this time period anymore, but if you look at like the Roman Empire, I mean, Romans were doing it to Romans. I think there's the criticism of this movie is sort of overly negatively portraying sort of the way Christians treated Muslims. And I think these slaughters were happening internally and between both sides.
Yeah.
I don't
agree.
Well, so my co-host mentioned, like, you have the Vikings who are sacking Europe at this time, and like the Vikings are raping and murdering and looting everyone, you know, like, until you submit to them, and even then you're still a subjugated people. And it's like the Caliphate is doing the same shit as they're storming through and taking the Persians, who I believe they were probably more Zoroastrian at that point. you know, and the Byzantines.
And the French and
shit.
English have been doing it since the dawn of time, and you know,
yeah, that's the nature of
it's the nature of man.
of conquest, and like, it's actually, if you think about it in the term of the historical timeline, it's almost a more recent ideal where like Western armies kind of got away from that and made a point to try to avoid doing that. And it wasn't like, it's almost like kind of the point of war was to go and rape back then, and now that's kind of more a secondary thing that happens sometimes, rarely.
Yeah, the Hospitaller tries to really boil things down very simply. Our job is to protect people who cannot protect themselves. So all that complexity aside, people are slaughtering each other. If you zoom in on any individual conflict, whoever is being slaughtered, go protect them, regardless of sort of the context, at least is what he's trying to say in the movie.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And in the movie, King passes away, right? Scylla marries Guy, who says, if I have your knights, you have your wife. At the same time, Balian is dealing with Templars now coming to kill him. It's a 3-on-1.
Yeah.
This fight scene is incredible.
It's a very Western fight scene. Like, zooms in on his eyes, zooms in on the sword, and he's like, come at me.
They do this 360 spin thing at the beginning, too.
It's great.
Well, he learned from Liam Neeson to put his sword high. And
you see him do that. Yeah, and I was like, yes. Yeah, what are you talking about? You're like, I don't see Liam Neeson in him. He did the sword thing.
Yeah, good point. But I think this is where Scott shines probably more than any filmmaker, quite possibly in history. His action sequences between, and you can see them just in Gladiator in this, those action sequences are done so well, so clean. And the one thing I love is he never holds back on the ancient violence. Like you see those slices, you see that blood, you see that hurt. And it's never quick, really. Sometimes it's multiple times, and he does it. The dirt flying up is like a quintessential thing where, like, you know, you're gonna have dirt thrown in your face, you're gonna not see things, you're gonna have rocks thrown at you, and he's the king of that. He really is, and you see it here in just like these little fight scenes.
You got to watch The Last Duel, because the fights in that, do you remember that? It's so messy and dirty and grimy, and it's kind of like the maximum version of what you're talking about.
Remember, The King.
The King.
Those fight scenes.
Oh,
Yeah,
I
that
love
was a
The
good
King.
one.
Oh, those
With
fight
Timothy
scenes with the
Chalamet?
knights where they get muddy.
You
never saw it?
No.
Oh, that's another
dude.
historical epic.
It's on Netflix.
amazing.
It's really, really
Okay.
good.
Oh, I highly recommend.
Also,
that
like Middle Ages.
one.
Yeah.
Probably the best like knights fight scenes that you'll see is in that movie.
He does a good job, too, in the fight scenes. A lot of other movies or shows that have as many cuts in the middle of a fight as he does, I would accuse of you're trying to hide sloppy
Fight technique.
choreography. You're trying to hide stunt doubles. But here you can tell Ridley Scott is using the cuts to convey the chaos of what a fight would have been like back then.
Yeah, perfect.
Fighting back then is probably the hardest fighting of all time. Like, imagine like just a bunch of people swinging metal around
And the
you,
weight
like,
of the sword. Like, you don't think about it, but it's apparently fairly substantial. Like, it takes practice just to be able to hold it up without getting your arms tired.
Oh yeah. Our friend Anthony showed up at my house one day. He's like, "Hey, I don't know if you want this, but I'm giving it to you." And I'm like, "Oh, cool, gift." And he hands me a knight's sword that's probably half the size of this table. It's heavy. It's a real knight's sword. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know why he had it, but he's like, "This is yours now," and just left my house.
You're now the ruler of Staten Island.
Yeah.
How is he managing on his crusade without his sword?
Maybe he got a new one.
Yeah.
Or he just broke into my house.
Yeah, basically the Templars came to kill Balian, so he's out of the way, and then Reynald and Guy can start their holy war against the Muslims. There's a side plot here, which not in the theatrical cut at all, which is Sibylla finding out that her son has leprosy.
Yes.
And I love the way they communicate it, because first you see the kid looking at a fire, puts his hand over it, lets it burn, and then he's kind of like, I don't feel any pain. And there's something about telling you something tragic without saying it out loud that makes it hit so much harder. Like, you have to connect the dots and realize what's happening.
Yeah. And they're like, let's prick his feet and see what happens. And he's not acknowledging it at all.
Yeah.
It's like, oh boy.
I thought the whole sequence of finding out he has leprosy and Sibylla's reaction of like, how could my son deserve this? I thought that was one of the strongest emotional points in the movie for me. I thought it was so tragic.
And I think it gets her to the point toward the end of the movie where she's more resigned and would be willing at the way end to go off with Balian. Not that this happened in real life, but start a new life.
Hey, so in the movie, is her son in the theatrical? Is her son in it at all?
I don't think he's in it at all. Right?
Which
wow.
Oh, so you didn't.
I had no clue why she was losing her mind.
Yeah, that definitely.
I was just like, this is weird.
That's crazy.
You definitely need that context.
Well, there's a lot. I mean, if you go back to out of curiosity, I didn't watch the whole theatrical cut, but I jumped back and forth a little bit.
You didn't have 6 hours to spare.
But at the first like 25, 30 minutes of the movie, you get to a point in the director's cut where you totally understand why he killed his priest, which also in the theatrical cut, you don't know that they're half brothers.
No.
But in the director's cut, this priest is torturing him for 20 minutes and making fun of the fact that you don't even know where your wife is buried. Could it be there or over there? I don't know. But one common complaint from audiences in the theatrical is like, why did he kill that guy? He like made fun of him a little bit. And then Orlando Bloom, this psycho, turns around and stabs him through the heart and burns him alive.
I'll say from experience, the theatrical version is very confusing because he's sitting in his house / like blacksmithing place, forge, and the priest comes up and is just like he steals her necklace and he's wearing it, but Orlando doesn't see it, Alien doesn't see it, and he's just like, your wife committed suicide, she's in hell. Yeah, she's in hell, she's not coming back, and like even no matter what, now what are you gonna do? You're gonna stay here? And he's just like insulting him, and Balian sees the necklace, rips it off him, stabs him and pushes him into the fire. And you're like, oh, that's excessive.
Yeah.
And then he goes on the lam. He's like, I killed the priest, now I gotta leave. And it's like, what just happened?
I have done murder.
Right? Like, I have no clue why. It was very crazy. I guess it's like a passion kill, but no, it's a priest. Why is the priest like saying this?
Yeah,
like,
there's a lot more buildup in the director's cut. I would still say there's a little bit missing. So if you listen to Ridley Scott, he'll say the priest was sort of jealous that his brother's smarter, more talented, has his own land. And he wanted us to look at the priest character and say, he's maybe not entirely evil. I don't think again, that's the common theme. You did not succeed.
No.
That priest is just, everything he does
He's
is
a dick
smart.
the whole time.
The Crusaders toss him a coin. He's like, yeah, I'm going to put this away.
Yeah.
Like, everything he does is evil. There's enough buildup where you get why you'd want to kill him, but there's definitely not nuance where I can understand why he's such a jerk to his brother.
Yeah, theatrical's like 2 scenes.
Yeah.
And that's crazy that they cut her son out of the theatrical.
Yeah.
It
weird.
needs it, I think, actually, you know? Like,
I think so, yeah.
that's something where if I was looking to cut, it'd be like, if we gotta lose some minutes, maybe, you know,
Well, it
clip a minute or two from the fight scenes.
It
Like, we need
comes
that.
off that she is
Mad that she's married to Guy.
married to Guy, and that like Jerusalem is falling, and she had to do this like evil thing for, protection.
So the evil thing in your version is she had to marry a guy she didn't like. In ours, she killed her son.
Yeah.
It's a different, yeah. They were slicing the movie up because of test audience reactions, but I think they had to accept at a certain point, this is not a mainstream crowd-pleasing movie.
No.
So if you slice it to pieces, it's going to fail. You might as well release an intact version that will at least get strong word of mouth, maybe have some legacy.
And I also think, like, we know the history is that, like, the Muslims took back Jerusalem, and held it for a long time. I think when you're ending your movie like that and you're presenting it to a Western audience, it's not a happy ending,
No.
So it's like, you're not gonna, you're automatically ending on a more dour note. So you need, for a dour note to hit like that, you really need to do a lot of goodwill and groundwork to lead up to that point where people are leaving the theater being like, I saw something good.
I don't know if it was if it doesn't count as a happy ending.
It's a loss, but that's I mean, Balian gets exactly what he wants out of that battle. He even says explicitly beforehand, my goal is to protect the people here and leave with our lives.
Yeah.
And so he gets that. He technically lost the battle. Now, I do think that one thing that would have helped the movie is this happens a lot with these stories where the big stakes are the common folk that are getting killed needlessly in these battles.
It's like Return of the King.
Yeah, like Return of the King.
Yeah.
I was going to say House of the Dragon.
More recently, House of the Dragon. But all these stories do that. And I don't know the solution, because the solution is get to know some of the common people so you can kind of feel their plight personally. But at the same time, the more interesting story is happening with Balian and all of them. So I don't really know how to balance that.
Yeah, imagine like Return of the King spent like an hour in the story about like some guy like and his family living in like.
And then I would have complained about that. So
I don't think it takes much.
Yeah.
Now that you mentioned Return of the King, because it only takes 1 or 2 scenes. It takes maybe a minute or two where they show a scene where a mother is putting her 2 children on a horse to flee. And she stays behind. It's like, you have to take the horse. It can't take all of us. I'll die for you. And it's like, that hits you. So like, even little scenes like that, you could have thrown in.
I think you're right. But it just, if you don't do it right, it can come off as really cheesy. And I think on House of the Dragon, it did.
Yeah, but I didn't think it was cheesy in this movie.
No, I didn't think so. I was almost saying I think it could have used more.
Mm-hmm.
Like the risk in House of the Dragon, for example, is they'll cut to a family and go way too over the top, where it cuts to them and it's, well, I'm struggling to put food on the table again. One of our kids is probably going to die because they're sick and we don't have enough money. And it's just so on the nose. Like if it's more subtle, I think it does work.
Yeah. Show like a family that Balian interacts with for like a second and then show them at a funeral like mid-war or like something like that will affect it a lot more.
And then
give you something to fight for.
The ending, which might at first glance feel like a sad ending because they lost the battle, if there were people you were connected with that now survive because they retreated, it might have felt more like a victory.
But even ignoring the regular folk, even just the people that Balian is fighting with, like all those different characters, like I was thinking about their lives during the battle.
The soldiers.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not like, I'm not saying this is a problem with the movie.
How dare you criticize it?
I did find what is missing from the movie that hasn't given it the same legacy as other historical epics, other than the fact that a worse version of it was released in theaters. And I think some of it is it doesn't have the obvious emotional hook that, like I compared to earlier, Gladiator. I really want to see him get revenge. Here, sometimes I could feel a little bit cold toward the story.
I don't know. I still felt the emotion, though, of in the final siege when they're lobbing these... I forget what you
fireballs,
call it. The fireballs at it,
Yeah.
and just seeing Jerusalem like burning, and just knowing that there are a bunch of people living there, like I don't. For me, I felt the emotion.
I would say from the siege onward, like basically the last 40 minutes, I agree with you. Just like on a visceral level, you can't not feel it.
Yeah,
it almost kind of reminds me of like because. In the early 2000s, we had that run of like sword and sandal epics, which came back largely because of Gladiator. But like this kind of reminds me of Troy a lot in a way, where like in Troy, you're kind of rooting for the people of Troy to survive. And the movie ends with them being run out of Troy and like escaping. And obviously Orlando Bloom's the connective tissue.
Yeah.
But I think it's just a similar thing. And I don't remember how Troy was received, but I just wonder like when you're talking about mainstream audience reaction, like everybody at this point knows what, for the most part, what a mainstream audience wants to see, where it's, at cliche, but they want happy endings. No one wants to leave the theater like bummed out usually. So I don't know. I just wonder if that's why it kind of tested so poorly and forced them to do these cuts and have this,
I bet probably
this shorter version.
Yeah.
Possible. But to another one of your point, they put these scenes in that are critical and crucial to the story, but you don't know the character and you don't really know the weight of it. Renaud kills Saladin's sister.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, that makes sense. And Saladin is, broken, but you never see it. You never even met the sister before, but you see her face and it's just like, oh, it's the sister. And it's like, okay.
Well, I don't have a problem with that scene really, because it works on a couple of levels. Number one, obviously, we know that you're killing the king's sister. He's going to be pissed, Saladin, right? And then the other part of it is also like she's in a burqa, and he's exposing her face. So I think that's the other part where it's like that extra level of violation, or there's like a specific term for desecration. He's specifically like desecrating her religion when he does that. So it's like that double two-front thing for the audience.
I also saw those points of like those were just quick progressing the plot, like getting us to the conflict.
Yeah, but you could have used those to have a little more depth, or at least connective points. Like if I knew who that sister was and knew that she was very important to him, or at least on some level he was hurt, then it's like, oh, maybe this Templar is a little more deserving. But now it's just it was written off too much like a casualty of war rather than a focal point of moving.
Actually, to that point though, Salahuddin is like kind of two-dimensional because we don't it's pretty easy for him to be this benevolent ruler, and like, I don't know, his sister gets murdered. Like, he lets Guy go at the end. I don't know, like, it's kind of, he's a little too perfect.
Right. Yeah. And that's like, at least show him being hurt from that, maybe a little more irrational than he should be, because of that. Maybe it causes some mistake that he overlooked something.
Well, it starts the war, right?
They were on their way anyway.
But there was actually that's the moment that broke the peace, which had had lasted for 10 years at this point and had just been reaffirmed with that other talk between Ed Norton and Saladin.
Anyway,
Baldwin, that's his name.
I was gonna say we're gonna cut all this out because our viewers don't like when we criticize.
Oh, really?
Well, no, we've started a new policy of pandering. That's all we do. That's not true.
It's called One Pander, our podcast.
No, I was doing research on other podcasts to see what can we learn from like podcasts with like big audiences that get a lot of feedback.
Don't talk about Canada.
Okay.
Or the Irish.
That's not what I expected you to say at all.
Have you listened to Tell 'em Steve Dave recently?
Yeah, the last 3 episodes I haven't caught up on yet.
Okay, so you don't know.
I didn't know if this was coming from your list of what's cool and what's not.
No.
I was embarrassed walking in here wearing jeans. I was like, I'm not cool anymore.
Jeans aren't cool?
No, apparently not.
According to my Gen Z, well, actually, they're probably Gen Alpha, my students. Yeah. Jeans are out.
What do they wear?
Wear like sweatpants.
They still wear pants. It's just not jeans.
Kilts are in now.
Yeah, kilts. That would not be surprising at all.
I would actually kind of love that.
I was glad to hear that sandals with socks are in now. Because when I was a kid, I always wore the socks because I was embarrassed to have my feet out in the open. I was known for this actually because I remember this one kid in my class was like, Gil, you'll never see anything. You won't even see a sock. You're lucky if you see an ankle. Someone tried to pants me once. My pants, I had the belt so tight. I'm just like, and they just keep yanking. I was buttoned up tight. Which sounds like today I would be cool, right?
Oh, you'd be the coolest kid in high school, man.
He hears about Sword and Sandal movies, like, oh no.
Well, Guy.
Yes.
He sent those men to kill Balian.
Yep.
He assumes they were successful. Yep. He goes to free Reynaud out of prison. This is where he's dancing.
Yeah, he's all happy.
So, little boys in heaven.
Yeah.
You killed Balian? Hey, all right. I'll give you a war. So that's when he goes and he attacks another caravan, kills Salah ad-Din's sister. Now, there's one little moment that's interesting here where, speaking to Reynaud's motivations, there's like one little moment of humanity where he's by himself, says something under his breath. So it's not for anybody else. This is just him being honest with himself, you assume. He says, I am what I am. Someone has to be. So in his mind, he is doing a greater duty. This has to be done. I don't want to kill innocent people, but I have to do it to start this righteous war.
That's a detail I missed. That actually does add a lot of color to him.
Yeah, I watched it a second time, and there were things I was confused about that I was looking for on my second viewing.
Okay.
And that was one of them.
Well, Guy wants to press the attack. He knows that we killed the sister. Let's meet them head on. Let's do this holy crusade. God's on our side. We're going to have glory and win. And he's meeting with Tiberius and Balian shows up. It's like, ugh. Balian isn't even mad. He's just like, don't attack. You gotta defend. That's the right move. You're gonna go die. Like, you have no water. Stay by the water. Defend. And they're like, no, we're gonna go attack.
I'm not gonna listen to a blacksmith.
Right. I'm not listening to a blacksmith.
Which, more of the no mincing words. Like, Balian knows there's no point in coming in here and chastising you for starting this war. War is gonna happen. Here's the best way forward from here.
Yeah.
Or for trying to kill him.
Right.
Yeah.
And now
this is really what happened in real life.
This is the Battle of Hattin.
But leading up to it, Saladin was like stationed his army by like water, and rather than sit in Jerusalem and wait and like have that force multiplier of like a fortified area, they went and met him head on, and they marched through the desert low on supplies, and they were already like half dead by the time they got to him to fight. And Saladin's army, just like in the movie, just kicks their ass. And that's what happened in real life.
It's very Napoleon. Is that whole sequence? You haven't seen the movie yet, right?
Seen it yet.
But even just historically, where he marches into the Russian winter, right? Mm-hmm. Totally unprepared for the elements.
Yeah, it's the same thing. It's just like, it's the folly of like, it's hubris, you know?
Yeah. And this battle, as quick as it is in the movie, probably wasn't like that. The actual strength is estimated, and it's so the kingdom, so these men about 18 to 20,000, where Saladin is about 20 to 40,000. So it's a pretty bad odds, especially when you're marching through a desert with no water and you're getting there tired. So just as we see as they get completely wiped out is accurate. Pretty much all of the army got wiped out. I think maybe besides 200 soldiers who were executed afterwards anyway. Saladin lost apparently a couple of like spearmen, like very little losses. So they got their asses handed to them.
And they don't show, like you said, much of the battle. And I think part of it throughout the movie, they're holding back because they want to save it all for the big show at the end. But it's a foregone conclusion. You see them thirsty, falling off their horses by the time they get there.
You don't need to see the one-sided beatdown. You know, it's not entertaining.
Exactly.
It's like, oh, this army, we could just skip to the aftermath, and that's enough. And this is how Reynaud died in real life with the water.
This was actually a pretty accurate scene overall. Like, there's an actual account where Saladin offered water to Guy. Guy took the water and handed it to Reynaud. And then Saladin is like, I didn't offer him the water. So I guess it's a symbolic gesture of you're thirsty, so here's water. And this hospitality is me saying, I'm not going to kill you. It's like, well, I didn't say I'm not going to kill him. So then they execute Reynaud. Guy is taken prisoner.
Yep.
Scene's so cool.
It's cool.
It's really good.
Fucking cut his
and
head off.
that water, like in the context of the desert, and then all that ice in the cup, like that looks like the greatest glass of water you could ever drink.
Yep. He's like, nope, not taking it.
I was wondering, did he think it was possibly poisoned? But it's also, why would he think that? Because they could just kill him, right? So it's probably just water.
I thought it was just the hubris, right?
Yeah.
He's not accepting this.
That's what
clemency.
I thought. And then the way Reynaud says right before he drinks it, I drink it for what it is, or something like that. Basically saying, I don't attach any symbolism to this or whatever. I'm thirsty. I'm going to drink this water.
Yep. And
then he gets a slow death too, because they cut his throat. They bring him outside, and then while Guy and Saladin are talking, you just hear the gurgling and him struggling to stay alive. So finally they put him down.
You don't feel bad.
No.
I'll say that. And this is something I never really see in movies either. After that, you see the aftermath of that massacre, where Baldwin and Tiberius come up, and vultures are everywhere.
That shot where they're all swirling above them is so good.
That's a work of art. You could have that as a painting, and it would be in a museum somewhere, and be like, "This is amazing!" Like, oh, perfection. That's might be my favorite shot of the movie, to be honest. Besides the marching,
I'll tell you what, a vulture though, in that time period, you're living pretty well, probably, right? It's probably the best time to be a vulture.
Hey, don't let those vultures go. It's also one of my favorite scenes, just the interaction between Tiberius and Baldwin. We talked about it earlier, but this is Tiberius's whole speech about how I thought I was fighting for religion. Turns out I was fighting for land. Then I tried to fight for peace. It didn't work. And this is where he sort of cleans his hands and walks away. And just Tiberius, who you see as this hardened military leader with such confidence and such a voice of wisdom, for him to be resigned and give up, it's heartbreaking. And it sets up the stakes of, if this is too scary for him and he's giving up, now Baldwin thinks he's going to go in and actually accomplish something. So it sets up the final siege really well.
Yeah. With less men, because Tiberius takes his men with him.
Yeah. Took them all and got
knights.
most of them killed.
He's got knights with them, and they go to Cyprus. Now, another thing that like kind of made sense, but from a logistical standpoint, you have Baldwin on the the siege wall, and he's like measuring distance for like archers and just throwing. Like,
they would paint the white rocks.
Yeah.
That would become kind of
Yeah.
markers.
Never seen that before.
So this is my thing, because we watch so many of these types of movies. Anytime there's like battle prep where the people that are being besieged plan traps for the battle area, I lose my mind and I love it. Like in Braveheart, how they soak the field with the oil and then they light everyone on fire. I'm a sucker for it every time. So this, when they're painting the rocks, I'm like, oh, there's going to be a trap.
They're measuring stuff.
Yeah.
This is awesome.
Yeah. It's like, it kind of slows that moment down, but then it makes sense because it has a nice little payoff with that one guy. It's like, oh, it's one scout. It's like, oh no, they're here.
They love the surprise army. There's only one guy here. Go over the hill, and it's the biggest army you've ever seen.
Endless onto the horizon. Here they all are, and it's about to happen.
They ride single file to hide their numbers.
And you get the speech, Bellion's speech to everybody. I could see where our co-host would have been very angry about this, because he's like, what are we really fighting for? We mentioned it earlier. Like, this is Jerusalem. The Muslims had it. The Jews had it. The Christians had it. Whose is this really? It's ours. Anybody who has faith, no matter who your God is, it's yours. I don't think a single Templar or Knight would have ever said this. I cannot imagine that.
It's definitely not historically accurate to the time period. I don't think anyone would have said it back then. It's clearly 2005 ideals being put into a character from that time period. Yeah. But
you're not raising my spirits to fight, saying that. You know what I mean?
Well, you were just
I know. I think it's more he's like just trying to say like we're all here and that's really what matters right now, and that's what we're fighting for. You know, none of the ethereal stuff matters right now. We got to protect this because we're all here and we're all going to die if we don't.
And I thought that the movie, so just in the context of the movie, not speaking to historical accuracy, but they've set up now for 2 hours of a lot of disillusionment with fighting for faith. And even coming to the Holy Land is sold less as, yes, you can have your sins absolved, but also someone who owns nothing here could own a whole castle in Jerusalem. So there's a lot of the disillusionment. So I feel like if you're going to give an inspirational speech at this point, if you say we fight for God, everyone's going to be like, okay, I've heard that before. So he kind of matches them and he says, look, I know you've heard that before. You have a claim, they have a claim. And so they're like, okay, this guy's making sense. And then he recenters them the way the hospitalier, the way he did for him earlier, recenters him on, like you said, there's people here who are going to die unless we protect them. Right. So it's a little optimistic and idealistic in the context of the movie. It just worked for me. I liked it, but I can understand why somebody would have a problem with it.
Yeah, I didn't have a particular problem with it, but I definitely was like, you know, that no one is saying that until like, you know, the 1960s.
Yeah,
right.
It's like, you know, but it's a movie. So, you know, a lot of the shit characters say is just not going to be
I did like the night,
a real thing.
The knighting scene.
The knighting,
like right after where it's like just you're making a knight make a better fighter.
Yeah, the bishop is like, what are we going to do? We don't have any knights. And so then he literally has everybody kneel down. He knights everybody. And then, like you just said, he goes, so making somebody a knight makes him a better fighter. And the music stops. Dramatic moment.
The Chad meme. He's just like, yes.
I was thinking, I'm like, that is a pretty good point, though. Doesn't make them a better fighter. But I guess in their heart, now they feel more motivated.
Right.
It's like Space Jam, MJ's secret stuff.
Yeah.
They have but this is actually what happened in real life. There weren't any knights left after they lost that other battle. And Balin knighted, I think, like 60 or 160 people to be knights. And that's what it is in the movie. You know, and it's in the movie, it plays out. He gave the guy the bitch smacking to make him a knight. And, you know, that's kind of what happened in real life. So.
Yeah. And just like real life, this is a 3-day siege.
So in real life, wasn't it? I think it was a 13-day siege in real life. And then in the movie, you see about 3 days worth of it.
That's horrific. Yeah. Like, it's insane anybody could survive any of that.
And like you were saying earlier, when you see those fireballs crashing into the city, it's another one of those moments where it's, how can they possibly survive this? And you do feel the level of danger.
Well, and that's why his speech lands for me, because it's, screw all this religion stuff. Like, we're in hell. Like, this is the end times. Like, this, like, there's like this apocalyptic force coming at us. Like, it works.
Well, and I also love, like we were saying earlier, about how they kind of hold back on the previous battles to save it all for this one. They also start with it visually looking very different. It happens at night, and then you suddenly see all the fires in the air. So it feels apocalyptic. Like, this is the big one.
Yeah. And I took note that it was night when the battle was happening. And I was like, I wonder if they're actually going to battle now, because all the other battles have been in the day. So I was like, maybe all the battles in the movie happen in the day because it's easier to see. But then the fireballs start coming. And I looked up the date of the siege. So it lasted from the 20th of September to the 2nd of October, 1187.
Yeah.
So what is that? 18 days? No,
13 days.
13. Okay.
And one just fun fact, they were afraid, Ridley Scott and the writer, to hand this script to anybody and have like a 25-page siege, because they knew any studio exec would see that and say, what's the budget on this thing going to be? So in the actual screenplay, it's about 2 pages. And they had a separate 20 pages that they called the Siege book. That's so cool. If this movie was more successful, they could have published the Siege book that you could buy.
Yeah. I love that they kept that on the side to get it greenlit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is smart.
I mean, this Siege had it all.
It's crazy they put all the money into a movie like this and then they butcher it with the editing. Like, that's horrible.
Well, and they knew what they were getting because you saw the screenplay. But it feels like in Hollywood, a lot of the time, the script is treated as a technical aspect. It's like a checkbox. We need to have a script to shoot a movie, of course. And they don't really care. Like, whatever it is, we just need words on a page. Then we'll go spend $200 million to put it on screen.
And a lot of writers, they're writing their script and then they're divorced from the end product because they know whatever they wrote, they got their check for. That's what I wrote, and they're going to go off and bastardize it and do whatever. And it becomes its completely own thing. And, like, sometimes it's due to a logistical problem where they have to come up with a solution. Sometimes it's something isn't working. An actor does something differently that changes things. You know, a test horribly. Did you guys see Falcon in the Winter? Brave New World?
Yeah, I saw it. Yeah.
I saw it like 2 nights ago. And there's some scenes in there where it's so clearly like they took Anthony Mackie on a green screen, like right before it came out, and like, come here, asshole, say this, you know? So like things change because they've been shooting that movie for like 4 years or something ridiculous. So it's like, you know, that's just movie making based on testing.
It feels like the lesson that Kingdom of Heaven should have taken, you know, what I was saying earlier, once you're in test screenings and you're starting to cut the movie to shreds, at a certain point, cut your losses, which in Kingdom of Heaven's case, I think it means release the real movie. Mm-hmm. In Brave New World's case, cut your losses means let's maybe shelve this one. You know, they didn't release Batgirl. They didn't release Scoop 2. Nobody needs to see this movie.
Now, could you imagine if they shelved it, what the reaction would it be?
I mean, it's been softened a little bit because over at WB, they've been doing it a few times.
Yeah.
So at least now
There's
Kevin
precedent.
Feige, I'm not the first one to do it. You know? I don't think the movie was atrocious. Like, it was watchable. It was totally fine.
I saw it had been out for like 3-4 weeks by the time I saw it. So I already had my own ideas where I had like the lower expectations that everyone's bashing. And I was like, okay, this is going to be pretty bad. I thought it was still not good.
Yeah.
But it wasn't as bad as, like, I wasn't like, oh my God, I want to kill myself.
Well, there's also a lot of weight on this movie where this is supposed to be the movie that says, hey, the MCU is good again. We learned our lessons. So I feel like you want to hold back and put out the right movie, you know?
Yeah, I honestly would love, and I know they won't do it because nobody would give a shit. I would love to see the original cut that tested horribly.
Yeah.
Because even if it's a worse movie, it has to be more cohesive. You know?
Oh, probably.
It probably makes more sense. It might be worse, but I would love to just see that version. Whatever. I'm sorry I brought up Brave New World.
No, it's all right. If we make enough deals,
they
maybe
brought
we
the
can
mood
find
down.
it.
I was,
You know, this is like why, like, I don't even want to criticize Kingdom of Heaven because at least,
it's like, what are we talking about? Like look at the other alternatives.
And they were trying to make a good movie. And look, it's awesome. I mean, they did so many amazing things in this movie. Like, Hollywood now has so much money, and they just spit out CGI trash. Like, they should just make historical epics. The stories are already made. Like, there's already stories. Just tell the stories.
You're speaking our language.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a quick ad for you guys. Podcast.
If you like history. Well, we get a 20-minute siege. And I love that we spent 20 minutes on it. So I feel like other movies would have montaged this, like days went by, but you need to feel, because you need to get to a point where you believe that Salah ad-Din would be willing and his people would allow him to make peace and say we had to withdraw.
Yeah.
So I think you need to feel the actual toll and you need to see 20 minutes of carnage.
And I love the battle strategies and the plans and like the last stand that they make where it's all like I love that it's like not just dumb, mindless people crashing into each other. It's like they try to climb the wall, so we do the oil, and they come close. So we launched with the trebuchets and like all that. Oh, the wall's coming down. We know it's going to come down. Let's get ready. And like There's actual like thinking behind the way they're fighting.
Well, and
It's
there's,
very
and
earned.
Yeah.
there's a progression to it, like you were saying too. They're getting closer and closer. The siege towers you have to mention; those are just so
It's
cool.
so cool.
And then when they
it's awesome.
harpoon them and pull them down, and it creates a domino effect. Because when
So
you
good.
see a large structure and a bunch of them in a row, you want to see them domino, and they gave it to us.
Yes, and I'll say this: that is. I don't know the reality of.
Don't
the
take this
siege
away from me.
towers.
Don't
I'm
tell
not-
me it
I'm
didn't
not-
happen.
I don't know the reality of the siege towers, but if you do take out those siege towers, we've done enough of these where the real stories of these forts, any fort, is such a multiplier that it will last days and days and days. That you could throw thousands of people at that fort, they're not getting in. They're just not getting in at this time. Medieval times, like this era. Crusades, if you have a fort you have enough of stockpiles of food, normally what you would do is surround it, cut off your supply lines, and just wait till you die, till you starve to death. That's how you normally
That's
would do
actually
the siege.
the easiest way
It's
to
the
win
easiest way.
win a siege.
Yeah.
If you can surround like the area and prevent any reinforcements or food getting in, and try to starve out the populace.
Do you know why they didn't do that in this case?
I think they tried, but I think the fight, like if you're just throwing 100 men here, 100 men here, 100 men here, and you lose 1,000 to 2,000, and you have 10 times the amount of people, you're gonna lose half your army.
No, that's what I mean. Like, why did they assault Jerusalem? Why didn't they just lay siege and wait for them to starve? I guess there's risk of Europe sending more aid.
I think it's a
Maybe.
European risk because
That's a
there's
good point.
probably a decent route from the sea
Mhm.
to get to Jerusalem to fortify it, and then Jerusalem is a pretty big city, and these have gates around it. So I'm gonna assume, I've never been, I'm gonna assume that they have like farms within the area where they're growing stuff, so they are gonna have a continuous supply of food. Whereas like a city like you ever see the movie Khartoum?
No.
With Charlton Heston, great movie.
Yeah.
But the movie is they're in a siege, right? The British are well, Charles Gordon is alone, but he's in like Morocco, I think, around. He's in a fort in Khartoum, the city of Khartoum,
Right.
and they're not able to grow anything. So
They need outside supplies.
they need
to come in.
outside supplies to come in to get them food, and they're slowly starving over time, and eventually like it gets to the point where they're like, we got to eat our camels, you know,
Yeah.
and they're like eating camels and shit. And it's like, I think Jerusalem is just a city that, and I'm talking out my ass here, I don't know for sure, I could be wrong, but I think it's a city where they have the ability to grow stuff.
Or they
Okay.
last
So-
longer.
So it's going to be with men and the ability to you know,
withstand
withstand.
a lot
It makes
longer,
it
yeah.
harder. Whereas, like, let's say they didn't have the ability to get food. Then Saladin could just encircle the city, camp out there and
Right.
wait, and time will have him win.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know? And again, he also, how long is his life? He probably wants to get going with it too. You know? You don't live long.
It's true, yeah.
Yeah, and you kind of see this agreement here. Now, the wall falls, so they charge in, and you kind of get this overview shot of people with shields just kind of clashing, and they're not moving.
I
It's a
love that
standstill.
transition.
And that's
Yeah.
usually what would happen. We'd see this countless times in history where one little opening will hold for how long? I mean, the Brave 300, right? Like, it's a
Well,
known thing.
It's you have a bunch of people trying
It's
to
a
get through. It's a bottleneck, exactly.
Yeah.
You have a bunch of people trying to get through one entrance. It's so easy to defend because you're like, well, we know where they're coming from. Just
Right. Throw some oil
know?
on them, throw some fire bombs,
Yeah.
and throw some arrows. Eventually, you're going to push them back. And Saladin knows, yeah, you'll take Jerusalem, but you still have to hold it. You know, so if I lose half my army trying to hold this thing, I'm not going to retain it. You know, I'm going to lose it again. So I need to keep my army in order while also not being a complete evil barbarian because I'm just going to have more people ascend on me.
well, that's the thing, and I think if they're already going to want it back, like the Christians are already going to want it back once he leaves.
Right.
But if let's say he walks in and he kills every Christian in there. Now what he's done is lit
Yeah.
a real fire
Yeah.
in the belly of all of Europe, and
a
they're
city
gonna
of martyrs.
and they're gonna put so much firepower to try to take it back.
Yeah.
So I think, he's showing mercy, but there's also a bit of strategy to it too.
Well, this is what really happened.
This is what happened.
Because they met, and Saladin said, I will just give up the city. Don't destroy it. because Balian's like, I'm gonna burn this whole place down. Like,
I do like that where he's like, I will destroy every Jewish relic, every Christian relic, every Muslim relic. I will ruin everything.
Very satisfying to hear.
Yeah,
because he's I mean, exactly what you just said. But I feel like this entire conversation is a lot of formalities because Salah ad-Din needs his people to see I had no choice. I had to make peace. And Orlando Bloom knows I need to put him in that position. So he says, hey, if you come in, women, children, I don't care. I'm going to kill all my own people. I'm going to burn the city to nothing. And he's like, Salah ad-Din even says, like, that might actually be better if you do that. But he knows, like, they're both playing this game of we need to put on a show for either side to even convince the zealots. Like, we had no choice but to make peace here.
Yeah. And he says, like, oh, well, what is it worth to you? Nothing.
Everything.
Yeah, I love that line.
I do like that. That is, he looks back like we're bros. Nothing.
Right.
Everything.
Yeah,
he smiles.
It's so good.
Yeah, he has like it's unnerving to see Saladin smile like that.
And I want to just second what you said. The shot where it's overhead and it transitions from fighting to just black, like everybody is either dead or asleep, basically just exhausted from fighting. And the way Ridley Scott described it is he wanted it to look like maggots consuming each other. And it does. It is just a great visual moment of that's what we're trying to avoid is just the senseless killing and just a pile of death.
Yeah.
And
he did a great job.
And on the way to broker this peace, Orlando Bloom has to step over all these dead bodies.
Yeah.
Oh my God. And even when they're talking with each other, you just see a giant like fire in the background.
And one of my favorite moments in the movie is after the two kings make peace and Balian has to go back and tell everybody the news, stepping over bodies. And he tells them, he gives a whole speech and then says, if this is the kingdom of heaven, looks back at the bodies, let God do with it as he wills.
Nope.
And I'm like, I don't know. It's so poignant and kind of just puts a nice little period on what the movie is trying to say.
Yeah. And
it clearly has a viewpoint.
For sure.
You know?
In real life, Saladin, he let all these Christians go untouched to Christian lands. And I can't believe that not a single person was untouched. It's hard to believe that nobody
is that what
I read there some were taken into slavery and some were killed.
Yeah.
But
let's not ruin the good story.
No, but
okay?
overall it was like most
Majority.
people were allowed to leave and survived.
It went better than it probably would have went otherwise.
And that's kind of what we were at before where you were like, this isn't a happy ending. I think that's a pretty happy ending when you stack up the odds because everybody could have got massacred and everybody lived.
Yeah, take it
that's
back,
a
Brian.
Miracle.
I'm not gonna take it back because
that's another miracle.
I'm rooting for them to hold the city, you know? Because honestly,
you got the wrong message. You're like, this is all about the Christians getting to keep the Holy Land. It's not about the people.
It's about God intervening to save these people. And you're like, yeah, but capitalism.
Look, I'm wired a certain way. I watch movies a certain way. I'm rooting for Orlando Bloom.
You're
city.
Reynold. I am who I am. Somebody has to be.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just like, look, I want to see Orlando Bloom. Like, I also, I saw this 20 years ago almost. I forgot I don't know the real history of the region until I do my research. So I'm like, obviously I know like the city changes hands a bunch of times and there's multiple crusades. I wasn't sure if this is the story of them holding the land or, So at the end when they are forced to leave, I'm like, oh, that's a bit of a bummer.
Yeah.
But, I don't know if your version has this. King Richard shows up.
I love
yes.
that.
Yeah.
I thought that was the perfect ending
Richard
to the
the
movie.
Lionheart.
Yeah.
Right? So, yes, he does show up. And I got a little thing about this that I read. Balian, in fact, was his key advisor in real life for the Third Crusade. So he was, So the ending should have been, hey, we're going on a crusade. And he was just like, yeah, I'm in.
That would have ruined the movie. And that's why you can't just do a straight historical account. No, but even right before that, and this is not in the theatrical cut, I don't think, but Guy is like, I'm not finished. And he comes back and he challenges Balian and they have a sword fight. And Orlando Bloom was like, I still have like cuts from that and we worked so hard. I'm really glad people actually get to see this scene now. But Balian, of course, wins the fight. And Guy,
well, he holds his sword up.
Oh yeah, I mean, you can't lose. That's the cheat code.
Wait, that's not you didn't. So you didn't see that?
Yeah,
this was not. I know that it's in the director's cut.
So the last thing you saw of Guy is him like as Saladin puts him on a horse with a
On a
funny
donkey,
hat and
on
sends
a
him
donkey,
Yeah,
in
that
his
was the last
underwear
I saw
going
him.
backwards with a dunce cap.
Yeah.
And they're all laughing at him. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the last I saw of him.
out. Oh, okay.
I was like, I guess he's killed.
Guy is the worst. I mean, Balian just saved everyone's lives. He just fought in a siege for 13 days to save all these innocent people. And Guy's like, fuck this guy. Let me try and kill him.
I think Guy honestly felt ashamed.
Yeah.
And essentially wanted to die. So he's like, I can't take my own life because then I go to hell. So let me kind of prod Balian. And once Guy loses the fight, he asks Balian to kill him. Balian spares him. When you rise again, if you rise a knight. Be better, don't die.
I get like chills hearing that line again. I'm a sucker for a lot of the lines in this movie. I thought that was amazing.
That's why I love the movie overall, because there are flaws for sure. But then there are moments like, I mean, again, the overhead shot of everybody dying, these things that land so well that it's,
Even Guy gets another shot at redemption given to him by Balian. Like, if you rise again, it's amazing.
When you see Saladin and his people cleaning up the land they just took, he walks in to a temple or some area and he sees a cross on the ground.
I believe that's
Picks it up.
I believe that's the Temple Mount or it's the crucifixion site. I forget. One of the two.
I believe so.
But you see the respect for other symbols. Yeah.
And
Which
Guy
is
did not
kinda
die in a
weird.
duel like that, by the way. He
Wait, Guy didn't die. He rose a knight.
Yeah.
Did that happen in real life?
No,
God.
unfortunately. He went and he was prisoner and he became Lord of Cyprus and he ended up, kind of dying without issues. And that's it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's kind of
not as satisfying.
unremarkable. Yeah, but that's what happened to Guy in real life.
But Balian goes back home with Sibylla.
Yes.
And then, like you guys were talking about before, it seems like they've kind of settled in. And then some nights go by. We crusade to recover the kingdom of Jerusalem. And you're like, oh, it never ends.
I'm getting too old for this.
And I love the interaction where, I come looking for Balian. Because I am the blacksmith. That's all I am.
Yeah.
He goes,
And he's
I am the king of England.
Yeah.
And you can tell that he knows who Balian really is.
Yeah.
But he says, I'm going to let him sit this one out. And then we're going to go and keep the fight going.
We'll get it ourselves, even though, they don't.
Yeah.
But by the way, this is like another example. It shows why the ending is a happy ending. Like, you don't want to keep Jerusalem. Like, it sucks over there,
Well, really, it's like the cycle keeps going on and on and on.
Right.
And people have been dying over there for thousands of years.
Yeah.
That's like the other
Do you
exclamation
think-
point.
And I wish Anthony was here for this because he'd probably rip his hair out. That the kingdom of heaven is not Jerusalem in this. The kingdom of heaven is the house at the end.
It's in here.
It's in here,
It's in here.
Right.
and in here.
Right.
Yeah.
Because at the end, he lives a peaceful life with his wife in France, I believe.
Right.
And he's done with war, he's done with all this pain and suffering, and he's just the blacksmith. And that's the kingdom of heaven where he always was.
Well, and there's
know?
this other idea too, which is what's written on in his forge, right? Of a man needs to make the world a better place, right? So it's like wherever you are.
Yeah.
That's the thing. It's like everywhere you go, you should be trying to help as many people as you can and be the best person you can. And that's kind of almost the real the kingdom of heaven on earth, right?
Yeah.
Like we're supposed to make this heaven. Are you supposed to make Earth heaven?
Our co-hosts have been strangling us right now.
He's
I was
like,
gonna
no,
say-
it's Jerusalem.
No, it's the church.
When Ant listens to this, if he listens to it, he's gonna be like, you're never inviting those two guys on again. But like when he's fixing up the land that he got from his father, what I love is that he also kind of smiles to himself, and you can see that he's enjoying fixing the land. So part of what the movie is saying too is that making the world a better place is not necessarily a cross to bear, where you have to hold the world on your shoulders. It actually feels good to make things better and elevate the people and the places around you.
Yeah, I agree, and I do think that's a good message. And there's one thing which I'm unsure about. So he's looking at like where his wife kind of died. And he sees like where she's buried, and he sees one plant kind of that's not like the others blooming. I think we're supposed to assume that that's representative of where his wife is buried, right?
No, so the plant actually is right outside his house. Earlier, you see a flashback when we first meet him where you see his wife planting something. So here you see it's bloomed.
Okay.
Then he leaves the house with Sibylla and they ride past her burial site. He kind of looks at it and then the two of them ride off into the sunset.
Okay, that makes sense. All right. I was wondering like if we're supposed to think that's where she's buried, but what you said makes a lot more sense.
You ruined a lot of the movie for me with historical context. Now I'm going to ruin this for you.
No, that made it better. That made it better. I like, if I misread something, I'm happy to get the actual read.
By the way, so Balian and Sibylla ending up together at the end. Sibylla kills her son. I mean, he could have had many years of probably a pretty decent life
With leprosy. Ooh.
Probably not. Probably not.
It would have been a torturous, painful experience.
Look at what happened with Baldwin. He died very young, and he got it later in life, I believe. So.
Okay.
He wouldn't have lasted a long time, and he would have suffered a lot.
I guess, especially as a child.
Yeah, he probably would have died before the age of 5.
There's one line that killed me when King Baldwin says, "Yeah, they tell me that this is a punishment from God, and that what awaits me in hell is worse than any suffering I've had on earth." And he's like, "If that's true, I say that's unfair."
The other line that I thought you were going to say was, he talks about how when he was 16, right, he won this amazing battle. And in that moment, I felt I would live to be 100. Mm-hmm. And now I know I won't see 30. Like, all of King Baldwin's lines I thought were, like, really hit.
Yeah. He's like, and I think it's weird to say, now more than ever, that character has been popping up on social media and, like,
the meme, right?
This? Yeah. Yeah, where he does the hand like quiet now, and the speech where it's like,
wait, they made a meme out of.
Have you not seen the meme?
Baldwin, yeah.
Really?
I didn't even realize it was from Kingdom of Heaven. I just see this meme of him with the mask holding his hand up.
Yes, it's him.
Stop putting your hand up like that.
We got it on video now.
Oh, and there's another great line. So I love.
Oh yeah, I see it.
Yeah, it's very popular now, and like it's like almost a resurgence of the faith, and they're using that, which is weird because he's not that. He really wasn't, at least in this movie. So it's interesting though.
This just reminded me. I'm remembering all the moments in the movie that had like little gut punches. But one of them, when Balian finds out what happened to Sibylla's son, Tiberius explains it to him, and it's almost like he doesn't want to say plainly what happened because it's too hard to say. She euthanized her son, so he says his mother gave him peace. She let him go, and Jerusalem with him. So he's almost like empathizing with her, but at the same time saying that's not really great for all of us. But it's just another great line.
Yeah, where it hits, it hits. And at the end, it says that text where it's just there's no peace there.
Yeah, peace remains elusive.
Yeah.
Oh, so on your guys' show, you like to give it a rating at the end, right?
We give it a 1 through 10 rating. Yeah.
Okay, so we can say the end of our podcast. We'll share it with you.
Yeah.
The format a little bit.
Sure.
Yeah.
I will give this a 6 out of 10.
6 out of 10.
I think it's a very okay movie.
We were just talking about the movie Brave New World. In comparison.
Yeah, if this is a 6, that has to be like a -3.
It's like it's probably like a 3, Brave New World.
It's twice as good as
Only twice as good?
Do you get this
Is it a logarithmic scale?
Do you get challenged like this on reviewing history?
No,
or you just get to say?
I mean, I usually will explain my grade. I'm actually way more gentle of a grade. I grade higher than usually my co-hosts.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
This one
I dread to hear.
No, this one I was not far off. I'll give it like a 7, you know? Like it's an enjoyable movie. I could rewatch this again. Even for like the character and the religious kind of mix up there, forgivable because like I said, it hits those main points, you know? And it looks beautiful. The action's fantastic. Come on, you know, like the shots of just the knights marching alone, it's give it a bonus for me. So, yeah, I'm not too far off from you. This isn't a 10 by any means, you know. Gladiator's a 10. I think 7 is reasonable.
Okay.
You know?
Do you need more time, or should I give my grade first?
I'm ready.
Go for it.
All right, I'm going to say a 9 out of 10. Okay. So I think a 10 out of 10 movie needs to be perfectly integrated. Like, there can't be anything bad in a 10 out of 10 movie. This movie had a bunch of flaws, but it gave me 3 hours of awesomeness. Like, there are so few movies I see that give me anywhere near as many just incredible things. Incredible shots, incredible lines, moments that stick with me. and I loved it. So I got to give it a 9 out of 10.
So for pretty much all the reasons you gave, I would give it an 8 out of 10, I think. I found it very enjoyable, all the good things that you said about it. I also have a little bit of a bias. I think as I get older, if you take any historical time period and just render it in HD, the way that Ridley Scott does, I could just sit in that historical time period for 3 hours. The movie's automatically a baseline, like 6 out of 10.
Yeah.
That's why even Napoleon, which deeply flawed, I still really enjoyed.
Yeah.
I mean, we can fact check me and see what I actually said on our podcast.
You're like 3 out of 10.
But, we talked about like vibes movies, and I didn't get vibes movies when people talked about like Nosferatu. But with historical things, I get it.
Yeah, where even if the plot is faltering a bit or you're not that engaged by the story, you're still enjoying the tone and the atmosphere.
The setting and the way everything looks. Yeah, I got it.
But I think the movie's pretty great. I think it's got some room for improvement, some of the stuff we talked about. I think I don't think it needs to be simplified so you have an emotional hook like, I want revenge. But if somehow they could have engaged us a little bit more, made us feel the cost of these wars a little bit more, so you really want the senseless violence to end. So the ending should feel like a happy ending. And I think the fact that some people walk away being a bit more conflicted, I think a little bit of conflicted is good, but you should really feel, I am so glad that these people escaped with their lives. And even if it doesn't last, there was a moment of peace for the human beings that were alive at this moment. But 8 out of 10, that's a great score. Even a 6 out of 10, that's still a movie worth watching.
I think it's definitely worth checking out. I wouldn't say it's bad, but like, I'm also having a rough couple of days. But
so if someone's like, we can all get along, you're like, shut up.
I'm having a rough couple of days. It might be a me thing, but it's also like, when I leave a movie, like, and I'm like, oh my fucking God, like that's when like it hits those levels for me.
For sure.
And this is a movie that it was never going to get me there with that outcome. Like Braveheart or Gladiator, movies like that, where it's like,
there was no freedom
exactly.
moment.
Like, there was nothing there where I'm like, yes, so it's fine. It's good. It's not bad.
As much as it's nice to say, you believe in some stuff, I believe in some stuff, whatever, it feels really good when it's like, no. This is what we believe in, and we're going to fight to the death.
Yes.
All right?
Yeah.
It's pretty satisfying.
Yeah.
I think it is like a matter of taste, because there were moments that got me fired up. Even just the kings, like him saying how sometimes a king may move a man, but a man may also move himself, and that you have responsibility over your own soul. I was like, hell yeah. Like
Gil's always pushing me around. I'm my own man. I'm starting my own podcast.
That's a good idea.
Well, I think on that note, I think we can wrap it up there. Yeah. So this was a great collaboration. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, we should do it again sometime.
Absolutely. I'm in for that.
Hopefully next time Anthony's back from the Crusades and he could join us.
Yeah, and we could choose a less historically fraught movie.
Yeah.
What's like a really softball one we can cover? I don't know.
Oh, there's so many.
Yeah. Moneyball. We'll do Moneyball.
Oh, we did Moneyball.
Okay, we'll find something.
Well, there's something.
Yeah.
There's something out there.
Well, thank you everybody for watching. First thing you should do is check out their podcast, Reviewing History. I don't know if you want to give a quick plug on that.
Reviewing History, everywhere you get your pods. We're on YouTube. Like, subscribe, share, all that stuff. Our Review History Pod on Twitter, Reviewing History Pod everywhere else. We also have a Patreon, patreon.com/reviewing history. That's where we dive in all sorts of other topics. I post what we put out every month, so you could take a look, see if you find something that strikes your fancy. You can subscribe for free. And, if you decide to pay eventually because you see something you like, that's great too. So that's Reviewing History. Follow me personally on all social media at Brian Rupert. That's with 2 P's. Follow me on Letterboxd. I rank and review every single movie I watch, even the ones I don't do for my shows. Thanks, guys.
Ditto everything he just said for one take. So if you enjoyed this podcast, make sure to like, subscribe. If each one of our listeners would find just 1,000 friends and got them to listen as well, we'd be doing great.
Really not asking for that much.
No. And the podcast, that's kind of the main thing we do. But on the side, there's also youtube.com/one-take-vids, where I do timelines and retrospectives on great film franchises. So thank you, everybody, for watching. I'm Gil.
I'm Daniel. And
now I wanted to let them join in on our closing.
I'm sorry.
It's even more fun, too, because they don't even know what it is.
Yeah.
I'm Gil.
I'm Daniel.
I'm Brian.
And Steve.
And this is one take.
I thought
One
it was see you on the
take.
next one take.
No, that's what it used to
One
be. We
take?
changed it.
One take. Yeah.
We'll fix it in post. It'll be great.
I like the idea of him just being like 5 minutes behind. He's like, one take.
Ah.
I got it.
Yeah.